right, good morning, PT on Ice Daily Show. I'm Zach Morgan, lead faculty with cervical and lumbar management courses. I wanted to bring you guys a little bit of content about finishing the drill this morning, but before we do that, I wanted to talk you through a few of the course offerings we have coming up. So most of our online courses have a cohort starting in the fall, whether that be very beginning of September or beginning of October. So make sure you head over to the website and hit it's ptonice.com and hit our courses, online courses, and you'll see the full offering of things that are coming this fall. So new cohorts starting with all of that. As far as live, we've got a bunch. So it blows my mind every time I look at the live course schedules. But September 11th, just 2 weekends away. So after Labor Day, we've got a bunch. Clinical Management of Fitness Athlete live seminar. That'll be over in Johns Creek, Georgia. We've got cervical spine. It's going to be in North Platte. And then we've got lumbar spine, September 11th and 12th as well in Mesa, Arizona. And extremity management. So a big weekend for ICE. That one will be in Bismarck, North Dakota. If you want to grab a seat to any of those, make sure you head over to ptonice.com and grab your seat. I've got a few more courses coming up with open seats left. I'll be up towards Boston for lumbar spine. That'll be October 2nd and 3rd. It's Bridgewater, Massachusetts. So I'd hope to catch a few of you all there. And then seats are filling up really fast over in Candler, North Carolina, just by Asheville with our buddy Jim Gregory over there. So that course is going to be big. We should have a big crowd over there. So make sure you jump in. We've had a really good year so far with the ICE, and we'd love to have more of you in a few of the courses. So let's talk a little bit about finishing the drill. I was kind of reflecting on a handful of the patients that I've had lately, and occasionally you'll have that patient. One of the great things about the Onward model, let me start by saying this, we market to the public, and so often we get these really acute pain scenarios coming through the door. Folks with really high severity, high irritability, pain complaints because they just injured themselves. And that can be a bit intimidating, but the great thing when you're working in that environment is that their recovery is much, much faster when you get them upstream before they've had that image, before they've had a lot of nocebo driven into their head. You can really help people a lot more when you catch them really early. So it's really nice having that. But one thing that definitely happens is when you get that huge drop in pain really, really early, or even almost getting them back to normal pretty quickly, sometimes you'll catch a text or an email from your client, and it might sound something like this, like, "Hey, Zach, my back's feeling great. Overall, I almost feel normal. Do I really need to come to that visit next Thursday? Like, I feel like I'm doing really, really well." So I've gotten that email several times or that text several times from clients, and it's funny because you really feel like you've done a really good job building this person the bike. You feel like, hey, they're really bought in. They're feeling wonderful. Of course they want to come back, right? But when people are totally pain-free, sometimes it's hard to get them back in, and they may ask you this question. I really feel like the way you respond to that question, it speaks pretty highly on how much you believe in your care. It reveals the value that you perceive in the product that you sell. So if you perceive a lot of value in your product, you're of course going to answer that question and say, yes, we want you here. Make sure you try to make it. Like, there's a lot of things that we still need to look at. But it's often really easy to kind of feel bad about pushing the person to come back in when they're pain-free. So, like, I have a lot of people I talk with where they might, like, let it slide and say, well, no worries, we'll catch you next time. Let me know if it flares back up. I think that's not the right way to respond to this, and let me unpack why. It's an easy way to respond. You're thinking about that person driving across town. You're thinking about their copay or how much they have to pay you for their visit. And you're trying to help them, right? You're like, well, they're pain-free. Is there really anything else that I should be doing? But I want you to think back to their physical exam, right? This was an acute scenario. Maybe it's back pain. I treat a bunch of back pain and a bunch of neck pain. So I think that's where it often manifests with me. It was an acute scenario. They come in. They're miserable. They have a lot of physical exam measures that aggravate their symptoms because they're so high severity, so high irritability. And the last time you saw them, maybe they were already 50% better and doing wonderful, but their slump test, it still just bit them really hard there at the end. As they were extending their knee, it still really grabbed that back pain. And it just made you it was a little unsavory for both you and the client. You're like, ooh, we've still got a little bit of work to do here. Well, now another week's gone by and that client's trying to kind of get off the schedule for the last visit. And it's really important that we get them back in so we can look at that slump test and see, have those final physical exam asterisks, those objective asterisks that we found, have they cleaned up? Have we finished the drill? Without knowing the answer to whether or not that asterisk is cleaned up, it's going to be really difficult for you to give your stamp of approval or for you to feel good about releasing this person to all of their prior activities. Like, think about if you've got a CrossFitter and that person, they may do 100 GHDs or 150 GHDs in a workout. Like, that's not super uncommon in the CrossFit world. That is like 150 loaded slump tests that they're flinging their body into that slump position. Or maybe it's 50 toes to bar, right? They're in a bunch of lumbar flexion with their knees extended and their hips really flexed. Before you've seen that slump test clean up, it's hard to say, yeah, go back and do that 150 times, right? Like, you don't know whether they're going to be okay. You haven't seen what the movement that originally injured them, you haven't seen what that looked like yet, because they were still pretty painful the last time you saw them, but it's all gone down. And it's really important, I believe, for us to make sure that we take a look at those movements. Like, we need better discharge criteria in these areas of the body that we don't have clean metrics to track. Like, I always think about return to sport with ACL. I feel like we have pretty good physical exam measures that you want to see if you let that person kind of back on the field. But with your just back pain, neck pain folks, or with a lot of like weekend warrior type injuries that are non-surgical, it's hard to know, like, when are you actually able to get back to it. So let's talk about it, because I think deep down we feel a little bit uncomfortable telling them to go back into their activities because we know what that physical exam looked like the last time we saw them, but it's hard to sell that last visit. So I think you should reflect. I know I have reflected on, like, what is it? What are the factors at play here that are helping me make this decision? And whenever you really think about that, if you haven't seen that person do the activities that aggravated them, you haven't seen them get into that full slump test and make sure it's symmetrical, it's really difficult to say, yeah, go back and do whatever you want, right? So I would really encourage you in that scenario where the client's trying to get off of the schedule for the last visit to say, hey, listen, I would love to see, you remember last time you were here, I put you in that position and it still really bit your back pain. In my experience, it's important for me to see all of those factors clean up. I think we should hold on to that visit and just take a quick look at a few of the things that were bothering you to make sure that you're completely cleaned up so we can feel good about you going back. I think that's a really, really good way to move forward with a lot of folks. And it's a way that I've really recognized in my own practice. I used to feel a little bit more like, well, yeah, let them go. Like, if they're pain-free, who am I to stand in their way? Well, now I really want to build a lot more confidence in my patients. I want them to feel really robust. And so to do that, I think it's important that we see the things that once bothered them. In that, I think it's really, really important that you say they injured their back on deadlifts. Not altogether uncommon. Deadlifts are not inherently dangerous. Done with good form and progressive overload, probably the best exercise we could do for our backs. But often people get in and they're either not warmed up well enough or they're jumping too hard, too fast, and maybe they have an injury. Before we see that person load up the same load that they were injured with and pick it up off the ground and watch them do that movement, man, it's hard to let them go do that again. I even think there's a lot of value in having that person be under fatigue if that's how they were when they got injured. So maybe you give them some bike intervals there in the clinic, or maybe you have them do a few other relevant movements and then watch their deadlift while they're breathing heavy, while their heart rate's 160. Checking those things to where you and the client can feel really comfortable with them getting back to what they're trying to do is crucial to build confidence and resilience, both in your mindset and in their actual body. So I think it's really important that we up our discharge criteria here and make sure that we are doing the best we can to really see this person's plan of care from end to end. I really want to kind of leave you with this because I've dwelled on it a bit as I've thought about this podcast. And I mean, I think the indictment that you could make, I mean, just get out in the community. You can run, you can do CrossFit, you can do Pilates. It doesn't really matter. Wherever you're at, if you're around active folks, you've always heard that person say, oh, well, I can't do that anymore because I've got a tricky back. Like how commonly do you hear someone say that? Sometimes it's not even working out, right? Maybe it's just things like taking your family to Disney World and carrying the kids. Like a lot of folks out there in the world, after they have a severe back injury, they just decide they can't do an activity anymore because of their back. They decide that it's just too dangerous. It's not worth going back down that route where they had all that pain. I think that's an indictment, not necessarily on the physical therapy profession, because a lot of them don't ever come to PT, but it's an indictment on the way we as society handle these pain scenarios. We do not finish the drill. We do not. People don't feel robust. Think about all the people that you see who never round their low back again after they have that really bad derangement. Like they're terrified of flexion when they drop their keys. They hold their spine really rigid and lunge down to pick up their keys. That in and of itself should really wake us up to the fact that people are not fully rehabilitating themselves. Like they're not getting back to that full range of motion and flexion. They're not restoring their straight leg raise symmetry. They're not restoring that slump. If we don't do that with our clients, it leaves a little doubt, both in your mind as the therapist, as well as in the client's mind of, am I ready to go back? And so I think the folks that see us, right, the people that we have control of, they're under our care, I think we owe it to them to do a little bit better of a job than society does. Society just gets people back, hopefully, or they never go back to work, or there's a litany of ways that back pain is handled in society. But I think it's important that if they're seeing us, I want it by the end of their care to see a handful of things. I want to see that baseline examination cleaned up, their active range of motion, their overpressures, their segmental exam, right? Their ULTT or their straight leg raise, whatever the things that were relevant to this person's case. I want to see those things cleaned up. I want to see the asterisks cleaned up before I'm feeling comfortable. Not only that is one piece, but that is such a low vigor exam when you compare to toes to bar or GHDs or running a mile or cycling for however many miles. Those are higher vigor, longer duration, higher stress activities. And I want to be able to see that so that way, by the end of the plan of care, you've convinced this patient, come back in for that last pain-free visit. You're doing wonderful, but I want to make sure we check these things. And when you put them in that slump position and you both see that nothing bothered their back, and then you take them out into the gym and you get them on the bike and you have them in that forward bent position and you have them do some intervals, or you get them on the GHD and you have them do some GHDs, and nothing bothers their back, the confidence that fosters in you to tell them to go back to the gym, go back to the cycle, do whatever it is they want to do, the confidence that builds in you and the confidence it builds in the human in front of you to feel strong enough to do the activity that once injured them or once hurt. That confidence is huge. And that's really how we can leave our folks feeling confident about their back rather than feeling like I've got a tricky back. I think that's an unhelpful way to move forward in this world. And unfortunately, a lot of folks move forward that way, feeling like after they have an injury that area of their body is just fragile and they're going to have a hard time loading it in the future. We really want our folks to be different. So that's really all I've got for you all. I've just thought about that a lot and thought about like, what are the things that we need to see at discharge? Like if we're truly going to wrap things up end to end and feel really confident that we've done the best job for this person. And I really think it boils down to that. It's fostering that confidence both in yourself as the provider and fostering the confidence in the human being in front of you. So that's all I've got for you all. Would love to answer any questions. Just throw them in the chat. I'll check it all day and love to get some dialogue going here. I think it's really important that we up our game in this scenario because we want our people resilient. We want them strong. Thanks, and we hope to see you on the road.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.